cub swallowed by a sinkhole. A crawl-away infant revealed the impossible exit. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning fog hung low over Millbrook Valley like a gray wool blanket. Michael Hayes set his coffee cup down harder than he meant to. The ceramic clicked against the wooden table, breaking the silence that had become too comfortable in his small cottage. His wife, Savannah, had been gone for 3 days now, visiting her sister in Portland, and the house felt emptier than usual. Outside, their 8-month-old daughter Lily stirred in her outdoor playpen. Michael had brought her out just after sunrise, hoping the crisp mountain air would help her sleep longer. But Lily was wide awake now, making those soft cooing sounds that always made him smile. Her chubby hands grabbed at the air, reaching for something only babies could see. The forest behind their cottage was alive with morning sounds. Birds chatted in the pine trees. A squirrel scolded something from a high branch, and somewhere, deeper in the woods, Michael could hear what sounded like a bear cub playing. The sound made him pause. Bears were common enough in these parts, but usually kept their distance from human homes. Lily had somehow wriggled to the edge of her playpen, pressing her face against the mesh side. Her wide green eyes were fixed on something beyond the yard, beyond the garden fence, deep in the trees where dappled sunlight painted shifting patterns on the forest floor. She babbled excitedly, her tiny fingers curling around the mesh. Michael stepped outside, the wooden porch creaking under his weight. The air smelled different this morning, earthy and damp, with a hint of something he couldn't quite place. Something that reminded him of the abandoned mine shafts his grandfather had warned him about when he was a boy. The bear cub's playful sounds grew louder, then suddenly stopped. A strange silence fell over the forest. Even the birds stopped singing. Then came a sound that made Michael's blood run cold. A sharp crack, followed by a terrified yelp that echoed through the trees. Not just any yelp. The desperate cry of something small and scared, falling into darkness. Lily let out a piercing shriek that seemed to shake the very air around them. Her little hands were gripping the playpen mesh so tight her knuckles had turned white. Tears ran down her chubby cheeks, but she wasn't crying. She was screaming at the forest, pointing with one wobbly arm toward where the cub's cry had come from. Something had gone terribly wrong in those woods. Michael's heart pounded as he looked from his daughter to the dark line of trees. Whatever had happened, the bear cub was in danger. And somehow, impossibly, his 8-month-old daughter knew it too. The mother bear's roar shattered the morning air like thunder. Birds exploded from the treetops in a panic of wings and frightened calls. The sound was so close, Michael could feel it in his chest, vibrating through his ribs like a drumbeat. Through the gaps in the fence he could see movement. A massive shape, brown fur and muscle, crashing through the underbrush toward where her cub had disappeared. Branches snapped, leaves scattered. The earth itself seemed to shudder under the mother bear's desperate charge. Lily had gone completely silent now. Her eyes tracked something Michael couldn't see, moving with purpose that seemed far beyond her age. She pushed herself up on shaky legs, gripping the edge of the playpen with determination that would have made Savannah laugh if she were here. "Look at our little adventurer," she would have said. But this wasn't cute baby determination. This was something else entirely. The mother bear's grief-stricken roar came again, closer now, followed by the sound of earth being torn apart. She was digging, desperate, frantic. The rhythm of her powerful claws against soil and rock created a heartbeat that seemed to pulse through the ground itself. Michael's training as a forest ranger kicked in. He knew these woods better than anyone. He'd mapped every stream, every hillside, every dangerous spot for miles around. The area where that cub had fallen. He'd always suspected there were unstable caves there. Underground voids left by water erosion. Sinkholes waiting to open up and swallow the unwary. He grabbed his satellite phone to call for help, but stopped when he heard Lily making a new sound. Not crying, not babbling. She was humming? A low, vibrating sound that seemed to match the frequency of something in the earth itself. The baby's face had taken on a look of intense concentration. She was listening to something, learning something, understanding something that made no sense for a child who had just learned to clap 3 weeks ago. Michael felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the morning cold. The mother bear's digging had become more frenzied. Dirt flew through the air in great clouds. Her roars had turned to something worse. A high, keening sound of loss and fury that made Michael's skin crawl. He'd heard that sound once before, years ago, when he'd found a bear mother mourning her stillborn cubs. It was the sound of a broken heart with claws and teeth. Lily suddenly pushed herself backwards in the playpen, her eyes still fixed on the forest. Then, with movements too coordinated for a baby still learning to crawl, she positioned herself facing the gate of her enclosure. Her small fingers worked at the latch mechanism, a simple press and slide design that should have been impossible for her to figure out. The latch clicked open. Michael stared in disbelief as his 8-month-old daughter crawled out of the playpen with the confidence of a child who'd done it 100 times before. Except she hadn't. Ever? The playpen was new. He'd assembled it himself just last week, while Savannah wrote detailed instructions even though the manual was right there. Lily moved across the grass with surprising speed, heading directly for the garden gate. Her destination was clear, the forest, where something was calling to her in a language made of earth and stone, and the desperate love of a mother for her child. The morning sun broke through a gap in the clouds, casting long shadows across the yard. In that strange light, Michael could have sworn he saw something glowing beneath the soil where Lily crawled, like veins of crystal catching the light, forming a path only she could see. Behind the cottage, in the depths of the dark sinkhole, something stirred. A small sound, barely more than a whisper, but in the strange acoustics of the empty space it carried perfectly. The bear cub was still alive, still moving, still hoping, and somehow Michael's baby daughter knew exactly where to find him. The mysterious humming that had come from Lily's throat seemed to linger in the air, creating harmonics with the mother bear's desperate sounds. It was as if the earth itself was composing a song of rescue, and his daughter was the only one who knew the melody. Michael's hands shook as he reached for the garden gate. He should stop her, should scoop her up and take her inside where it was safe. But something held him back. Some instinct, some knowing that went beyond logic or reason. There were old stories in these mountains. Stories his grandfather had whispered to him on long winter nights. Tales of children who could hear the earth's heartbeat, of ancient pathways that only the truly innocent could find. Stories he'd always dismissed as superstition, born from isolation and too much moonshine. But watching his daughter now, he wondered if those stories held more truth than he'd ever imagined. The sinkhole had opened exactly where Michael had always suspected one might form. Years of water erosion, underground limestone caves, geological instability, the perfect conditions for a sudden collapse. He'd submitted reports about it to the county office 3 times. They'd promised to send a geological survey team. That promise was 6 months old now, and now a bear cub was paying the price for bureaucratic delays. Michael finally moved, pushing open the garden gate before Lily could reach it. She looked up at him, and for one disorienting moment he could have sworn he saw something ancient and knowing in those baby green eyes. Something that reminded him of the way his grandfather had looked right before he'd passed away, as if he was seeing beyond the veil of the ordinary world. "Dada," Lily said clearly. She'd only ever said Mama before. The word hit Michael like a physical blow, not just because it was his first Dada, but because of how she said it. There was urgency in it, and a command, and something that sounded remarkably like hurry. Behind them, the mother bear had stopped digging. In the eerie quiet that followed, Michael could hear her sniffing the air, testing it, and then, to his horror, he realized what she was smelling: his daughter. The massive bear's head lifted above the brush line, and Michael got his first clear look at her. She was easily 600 pounds, her fur matted with dirt and debris from her desperate excavation. Her eyes were small and dark, and filled with something far more terrifying than rage. They were filled with the calculating intelligence of a mother who had just realized there was another child nearby. Lily showed no fear. Instead, she started that strange humming again, louder this time. The sound seemed to act as a bridge, carrying across the distance between baby and bear, and impossibly, miraculously, the mother bear tilted her head as if listening, as if understanding. Michael's training told him to grab Lily and run. Bears were unpredictable at the best of times, and a mother who had just lost her cub was the most dangerous creature in the forest. She could cover the distance between them in seconds. One swipe of her massive paw could end both their lives. But something else, some deeper instinct that went beyond his training, kept him still. The forest had fallen into an unnatural hush. Even the wind had died down to almost nothing. In that crystalline silence, Michael could hear things that shouldn't have been audible. The slow drip of water deep underground, the grinding of stone on stone in places where the earth was still shifting, the rapid breathing of a small creature fighting to stay alive in the darkness below. Lily's humming rose to a pitch that seemed to resonate with the very bones of the mountain. And in response, something answered. Not from the sinkhole, not from the mother bear, from the earth itself. A sound like nothing Michael had ever heard. A deep vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't quite musical, wasn't quite speech. It was more like the memory of a song that the mountain had been humming since the world was young. The mother bear took one massive step forward, her claws leaving deep furrows in the soft earth. Then another. Her nose was working furiously, taking in scents and stories that only she could read. She was close enough now that Michael could see the individual strands of dirt in her fur, could smell the musk and sweat of her fear and fury. Lily crawled forward with determination that defied her limited physical abilities. She moved as if pulled by an invisible cord, heading straight for the edge of the sinkhole where the mother bear loomed. And Michael, against every instinct screaming in his head, let her go. The baby reached the spot where the ground had collapsed, where the earth fell away into hungry darkness. She sat at the very edge, legs dangling over empty space, small hands patting the ground as if looking for something specific. The mother bear watched, her huffing breath creating small clouds in the crisp air, her massive body coiled with tension, but somehow, inexplicably, held in check. Lily's chubby fingers found what they were seeking. She gripped a protruding root at the edge of the sinkhole and leaned forward, peering into the darkness. The movement sent a cascade of loose soil and pebbles tumbling into the void below. From deep within the earth came a weak but unmistakable sound, the desperate whimper of a frightened cub who had just heard hope approaching. Michael's heart nearly stopped as he watched his daughter lean even further forward. He took a step, ready to grab her, to pull her back from the edge before the unstable ground gave way. But before he could move, the mother bear did something that would haunt his nightmares for years to come. She reached out one massive paw, the same paw that could crush a man's skull with ease, and gently, almost tenderly, pressed it against Lily's back. Not pushing her forward, but stabilizing her, keeping her from falling as she searched the darkness for answers only she could find. Bear and baby, predator and prey, working together in a moment that defied everything Michael thought he knew about the natural world. The sun had climbed higher now, its rays penetrating deeper into the forest. As the light shifted, Michael saw something that made his breath catch. The soil around the sinkhole wasn't uniform. There were patterns in it, almost like veins or channels, that became visible only when the light hit at just the right angle. And these patterns seemed to glow faintly, as if something in the earth itself was luminescent. Lily's humming had taken on a new quality now. The sound wove through the air like visible mist, creating harmonics that made the patterns in the soil pulse gently. Or maybe Michael was seeing things. Maybe the stress of watching his infant daughter dance at the edge of death was making him imagine impossible things. But then the mother bear began to hum too. It was a sound Michael would have thought impossible for a creature of her size and ferocity, deep and resonant, but somehow delicate at the same time. A lullaby in a language that predated human memory. Together, their voices created something new, a symphony of need and understanding, of maternal love that transcended species. The patterns in the soil brightened, pulsing in time with the dual humming. And deep below, the cub's whimpers grew stronger, as if encouraged by the song from above. Suddenly, Lily stopped humming. She sat perfectly still for a heartbeat, then raised her arm and pointed directly into the darkness of the sinkhole. Not vaguely, not in the general direction, but with the precision of someone who could see exactly what others couldn't. "Deep," she said, stretching the word out in a way that sent shivers down Michael's spine. Bright, dark. The words made no sense, but Michael understood anyway, or thought he did. His grandfather's stories rushed back, tales of the bright dark, the luminous caverns that supposedly existed beneath the mountains, caves that older cultures had considered sacred, places where the boundary between worlds grew thin, places that could be reached only by those pure of heart and clear of purpose. The mother bear understood too. Her massive head lowered until it was level with Lily's, until they were face to face, infant and apex predator, brought together by circumstances that should have made them mortal enemies. For a moment that stretched beyond time, they stayed like that, and Michael could have sworn they were exchanging something. Not words, not even thoughts, but something more fundamental. Permission, alliance, trust. Then the bear did the unthinkable. She stepped back, her massive form retreating enough to give Lily room, but staying close enough to react. Her dark eyes moved to Michael, and in them he saw not the mindless ferocity of a wild beast, but the calculating consideration of an equal. A parent recognizing another parent. A plea for help in the only way a bear could ask. Lily, as if following a rehearsed plan, began to scoot backwards from the edge. Michael rushed forward to help her, relief flooding through him as he lifted her away from immediate danger. But his relief was short-lived. The baby squirmed in his arms, not toward the house in safety, but along the edge of the sinkhole. She was searching for something, her small hands grasping at the air with the intensity of someone trying to remember a forgotten dream. The mother bear paced alongside them, her massive bulk surprisingly graceful as she matched Lily's chosen direction. Together, they traced the perimeter of the collapsed ground, the bear's nose occasionally dipping to test the air near the earth, Lily's eyes scanning the darkness below whenever gaps in the tree roots allowed. They had traveled perhaps 20 feet when Lily suddenly stopped squirming. She pointed again, this time not down into the sinkhole, but to a spot on the bank itself, a place where the soil had a slightly different texture, a different color, where the luminescent patterns seemed to converge. "Tunnel," Lily said clearly. Her first three-syllable word, spoken with the confidence of someone naming something they'd known all along. Michael felt his knees go weak. In all his years ranging these woods, he'd never seen anything like what his daughter was pointing to. But as he looked closer, as the morning sun hit the spot at just the right angle, he could see she was right. There was something there. Not quite a hole, not yet visible to adult eyes too cluttered with preconceptions. But something. A thinness in the earth. A weakness in the barrier between above and below. The mother bear could see it too. Her nose touched the spot, and a low rumble of recognition came from her chest. This time she didn't hesitate. Her powerful claws began to dig, but carefully now, not with the desperate frenzy from before. This digging had purpose. This digging had hope. As the bear worked, exposing what lay beneath, Michael's training finally clicked into place. He understood now why this spot had always felt wrong to him during his rounds. This wasn't just random geology. This was a lava tube, part of the ancient volcanic activity that had shaped these mountains millennia ago. Over time, erosion and water had created a network of caves and passages that honeycombed the mountain. And somewhere in that dark maze, a frightened cub was lost. The mother bear had exposed a narrow opening now, barely large enough for her to squeeze through. But she hesitated, her massive head turning to look at Lily with an expression Michael could only describe as pleading. The bear was too large for such delicate work. Her attempts to rescue her cub could just as easily bring the fragile passage collapsing down. But a baby? No, Michael said automatically, his arms tightening around Lily. The word came out harder than he intended, sharp with parental fear. Absolutely not. Lily, however, had other plans. She twisted in his arms with surprising strength, reaching toward the opening. Her humming started again, that eerie, multi-toned sound that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her tiny lungs. And as she hummed, the exposed soil of the passage walls began to show more of those glowing veins, more pronounced now, creating a gentle illumination that stretched into the darkness. A light to guide the way. The mother bear lowered herself to the ground, positioning her massive body as a bridge between the solid earth and the dangerous passage. She looked at Michael again, and this time her message was unmistakable. I trust you with my child's life. Will you trust me with yours? Michael's mind raced through possibilities, through risks, through all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. But then he heard it, weak but distinct, the cub's whimper echoing up through the newly exposed passage. A sound full of pain and fear and the fading strength of a young life teetering on the edge. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. In that moment, Michael saw himself reflected in the mother bear's eyes, saw his own willingness to face impossible danger for the sake of his child, saw the same fierce love that drove him to check Lily's breathing a dozen times each night, that made him baby-proof every corner of every room, that would have him willingly walk into fire if it meant keeping her safe. And in seeing himself, he saw the bear not as a monster or a curiosity, or even as a wild animal, but as exactly what she was, another parent caught in an impossible situation. Savannah will kill me if she finds out I let our daughter crawl into a cave to rescue a bear cub, he muttered. But he was already moving, positioning himself for what he knew he was about to do. Lily seemed to understand she'd won. Her humming became something like a purr, content but purposeful. She reached for the opening with eager hands, and Michael felt his heart breaking and expanding at the same time. His baby, his tiny daughter who had only learned to clap last month, was about to become a hero in ways he'd never imagined possible. The mother bear rumbled deep in her chest. Not a threat, but a promise. I will guard this entrance. I will guard your child as she guards mine. Michael positioned Lily at the opening, his entire body shaking with the effort it took to override his paternal instincts. The passage was tight but navigable for a small child. The glowing veins in the soil had intensified, creating a bioluminescent pathway that should lead Lily to where she needed to go. "Mama Bear," Lily said, looking up at the massive creature. Then, turning to Michael, "Dada Brave." Those simple words broke something in Michael's chest. This wasn't just about rescuing a cub anymore. This was about the moment a father had to choose between protecting his child from all danger and allowing her to become who she was meant to be. Between wrapping her in cotton wool and teaching her that sometimes being human meant taking extraordinary risks for others. "Be safe, Peanut," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Follow the lights. Find the baby bear. Come back to Daddy." Lily responded by planting a wet baby kiss on his cheek, then turning to the passage with a determination that would have been comical if the stakes weren't so terrifyingly high. She crawled into the darkness, following the ethereal glow of the veins in the soil. Michael watched until her small form was swallowed by shadow, until only the faint sound of her humming remained, that otherworldly song that seemed to resonate with the mountain itself. The mother bear moved then, positioning herself at the entrance in a way that blocked Michael's view, but, he realized, would prevent any debris or cave-in from reaching down to where Lily now crawled. She had become a living buttress, using her massive body to shore up the entrance. And so they waited, father and bear standing guard together, for news from the luminous dark below. Time lost all meaning as Michael strained to hear any sound from the passage. The mother bear had gone perfectly still, her breathing so controlled it barely ruffled the air. Only her ears moved, rotating like radar dishes, tracking sounds Michael's human ears couldn't detect. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. The sun climbed higher, creating a patchwork of light and shadow across the forest floor. Then something changed. The mother bear's rumbling began again, but this time the sound was different. Higher pitched, almost melodic. Michael realized, with a shock, that she was responding to something he couldn't hear. Lily's humming, traveling up through the earth itself. The mountain had become a resonance chamber, carrying their song back and forth like ancient whispers. Suddenly, a sound emerged from the passage that made Michael's heart stop. Lily's tiny grunt of effort, followed by words that shouldn't have been possible for an 8-month-old. "Almost there. Hold on, little one." Michael stared at the opening in disbelief. That wasn't baby talk. Those were full sentences with perfect grammar, spoken in Lily's voice but with a wisdom and maturity that belonged to someone much older. It was as if the mountain itself was speaking through his daughter. The mother bear's massive head swiveled toward him, and in her eyes Michael saw recognition. She'd heard it too. Something was happening to Lily in those glowing passages. Something that terrified and amazed him in equal measure. Another sound emerged, a sharp cry that was definitely not human. The cub! But it wasn't a cry of fear this time. It was excitement, relief. The sound of a young creature seeing rescue approach. "Found you," Lily's ancient young voice echoed up. "Sweet baby bear, scared no more." Michael couldn't see into the passage from where he stood, but he could hear movement now. The soft shuffle of small bodies, the scratch of claws against stone. They were coming back. But something else was happening too. The glowing veins in the exposed soil were brightening, pulsing faster. The pattern had become a flowing river of light, moving now instead of static, and it wasn't just the passage anymore. Michael could see similar patterns appearing in trees around the sinkhole, in rocks, even in the bare patches of soil where Lily had crawled. The entire clearing was lighting up like a constellation map, with the sinkhole as its center. A new sound joined the symphony, the deep groan of earth shifting. Not violently, not threatening, but deliberately, intentionally. The ground around the sinkhole's edge began to settle, compacting and stabilizing. Small rocks rolled together, forming barriers where the ground was weakest. Roots reached across open spaces, weaving themselves into organic safety nets. The mountain was repairing itself. Movement at the passage entrance drew Michael's attention. A small brown snout poked out, followed by bright eyes that blinked in the sudden daylight. The cub emerged slowly, limping but alive, his fur matted with dirt, and his body slightly shaken from his ordeal. He was thin, too thin, as if he'd been lost down there far longer than the few hours since his fall. But it was what followed that stole Michael's breath away. Lily crawled out of the passage, but she wasn't alone. Balanced carefully on her back rode another figure. A small girl, perhaps 3 years old, with skin that seemed to shimmer with the same luminescence as the glowing veins in the earth. Her hair was silver white, and her eyes held galaxies. Michael rubbed his own eyes, certain he was hallucinating from stress and shock. But the child remained, riding atop his daughter like a mythical guardian spirit. The mother bear made a sound Michael had never heard before, a gentle rumble of wonder mixed with gratitude. She reached forward with infinite care and lifted her cub with her massive jaws, checking him over as only a mother could. The cub nuzzled into her comfort, making soft whimpering sounds of relief. But then something extraordinary happened. The cub, still nestled in his mother's protective hold, looked up at the glowing child. Their eyes met, and a current of understanding passed between them. A recognition older than language, deeper than species barriers. The pale child smiled and reached out a small, translucent hand. The cub stretched up with his tiny nose, and when they touched, a shockwave of energy pulsed through the clearing. The glowing patterns flared brilliant white for an instant before settling into a soft, steady azure glow. "Who?" Michael started to ask, but his voice caught in his throat as the child turned her otherworldly gaze to him. "Father of Lightkeeper," she said in a voice like wind chimes in crystal caves. "Your child heard the old call. She answered what others forgot." The pale child slid from Lily's back and moved toward Michael. Where her bare feet touched the ground, small flowers bloomed instantly. Flowers he recognized from his grandfather's old journals. Starbells, they were called. Flowers that supposedly only grew where the veil between worlds was thinnest. "I am Echo," the child continued. "Last guardian of the bright dark. For 3 summers I've watched the passages, waiting for one pure enough to hear the mountain's need." 3 summers, Michael thought. But she looks barely 3 years old herself. As if reading his thoughts, Echo smiled. Time flows differently in the bright dark. 3 summers, 30 years, 300, all the same when you tend the eternal lights. She turned to Lily, who had been watching this exchange with remarkable calm for a baby who'd just crawled through a mountain passage. "You heard what was hidden, saw what was lost. The cub's fall was no accident. It was a key turning in an ancient lock, a trigger to waken what slept." The mother bear had been listening intently. Now she gently set her cub down and stepped forward, her massive form oddly graceful as she approached Echo. The pale child reached up and placed a glowing hand on the bear's snout. For a moment, bear and guardian stood frozen in communion. When Echo stepped back, tears glittered in the mother bear's dark eyes. "She knows now," Echo whispered. "Knows why her cub was chosen to fall, why his cry echoed through dimensions instead of just distance. The old pact between bear and guardian was broken 3 generations ago. No one remembered the words to mend it." Michael's mind reeled. Pact? What pact? "The bears have always been wardens of these woods," Echo explained, gesturing to the glowing pattern still visible in the earth. "And we guardians have always protected the paths beneath. Together, we maintained the balance between above and below, between seen and unseen. But when humans brought iron and gunpowder to these mountains, the agreements were forgotten. The passages sealed themselves, the light grew dim." She looked at Lily with something like hope in her ancient eyes. "Until she heard the call. Only the innocent can bridge what was broken. Only a child can remember what adults have forgotten." A new sound interrupted, the distant rumble of engines and the chop-chop of helicopter blades. Someone had heard the mother bear's earlier roars and called for help. Rangers were coming, expecting to find a dangerous bear situation requiring intervention. The mother bear heard them too, and growled low in her throat. Her maternal duty to her cub warred with the old agreement she'd just remembered. Bears were meant to keep human and passage separate, to prevent those not worthy from finding the sacred ways. "Wait," Echo said, raising her hand toward the approaching sounds. The glowing patterns in the earth responded, brightening once more. The sound of the helicopter faltered, wavered, then began to fade as if being drawn away by invisible currents. "I can turn them aside for a while," she said, "but not forever." The old protections weakened when the pact was broken. Human technology grows stronger while magic grows dim. She turned to Michael with urgent intensity. "You must choose, Father of Lightkeeper. The passage Lily found, it leads to places your world has forgotten. Realms where time moves like honey and thoughts become real, where healing grows in crystal gardens and wisdom flows in underground rivers." The cub, now stronger, wobbled over to Lily and nuzzled her arm. The connection between them was visible now, thin strands of light linking child and beast, creating a bridge of mutual trust. "Take your daughter home," Echo continued, "and she will grow up normal, safe, forgetting this day as dreams fade upon waking. The passages will remain open for a while longer, but without a lightkeeper to tend them, they will eventually seal again." She knelt before Lily, who reached out chubby hands to touch Echo's luminescent face. "Or let her remember. Let her learn. Let her become what she was born to be, a new guardian, a bridge between what was and what could be." The helicopter sounds had completely disappeared now, leaving an unnatural quiet that pressed against Michael's eardrums. He looked at his daughter, his normal, giggling, milk spill on the carpet baby daughter, and saw something else. Something powerful and ancient and terrifyingly beautiful lurking behind those innocent green eyes. "If I choose the second path," he asked, his voice rough with emotion, "then you too must remember," Echo replied. "The father of a light keeper cannot remain blind to the wonder. You must learn the old ways your grandfather half remembered. Must help her tend the passages until she's old enough to choose her own destiny." The mother bear rumbled agreement, her massive presence somehow comforting now instead of threatening. The cub had found his feet properly now and was exploring the perimeter of the sinkhole with the curiosity only the young possess. Every few steps he'd look back at Lily, as if seeking approval from his unexpected savior. Michael felt the weight of generations in this moment. How many families before him had faced similar choices? How many had chosen safety over wonder, forgetting over knowing? His grandfather's stories took on new weight. They weren't just tales told by firelight, but echoes of real choices, real sacrifices. The glowing patterns in the earth pulsed gently, creating a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. Lily crawled toward him, her small hands leaving glowing prints on the grass where she moved. When she reached him, she pulled herself up on his leg in that way that always made him melt, looked up with those ancient young eyes, and said something that shattered every wall he'd built around possibility. "Dada, remember, we friends with Bear now." Simple words, baby words, but charged with implications that reached beyond the mundane world he'd known. The mother bear moved closer, her massive head lowering until she was eye level with Michael. In her dark gaze, he saw an intelligence that matched his own, a consciousness aware of itself, a being capable of choice and honor and memory. This wasn't just an animal operating on instinct anymore. This was a person in a different form, offering alliance. She huffed softly, a sound almost like a question, and tilted her head toward the passage entrance. "Show him," the gesture seemed to say. "Let him see what lies beneath before he chooses." Echo understood immediately. "Yes," she breathed. "He should see. Both should see." She turned to Michael. "I can hold the passage stable while you look. Just a glimpse of what waits below. Then you decide." Before Michael could protest, Echo was moving back to the passage entrance. She knelt and placed both hands on the ground, and the glowing veins brightened to daylight intensity. The passage itself seemed to widen slightly, making it easier to see inside. "Lily stays with me," the mother bear rumbled. The words weren't spoken aloud. Michael knew bears couldn't talk. Yet he understood them as clearly as if she'd written them in his mind. She lowered herself to the ground, creating a protective barrier with her body as she'd done before. Lily crawled to the mother bear without hesitation, pulling herself up against the massive creature's side as if climbing the world's most dangerous jungle gym. The bear wrapped one enormous paw gently around her, holding her secure as a mother would hold her own cub. Okay," Michael stammered, still processing the fact that a bear had just spoken to him in feelings, if not words. Echo gestured impatiently to the passage. "Time moves differently down there," she warned again. "What feels like minutes here could be hours below, or hours here could be moments below. Trust the light to guide you back." Michael approached the passage on hands and knees, his large frame barely fitting where Lily had moved with ease. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he felt the change. The air was different, thinner somehow, but sweeter. Rich with scents he couldn't identify, but that seemed to awaken memories he didn't know he had. The glowing veins in the walls provided perfect illumination, washing everything in that soft blue-white light. He crawled forward, following the path Lily had taken, amazed at how the tiny humans had navigated this maze. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes opening into small chambers adorned with crystals that hummed with their own inner light, sometimes narrowing so much he had to turn sideways to continue. And then he found it, the chamber where Lily had found the cub. It opened up into a space the size of a small room, with a ceiling that arched high above. But it wasn't the size that stole his breath. It was what the chamber contained. The walls were covered in paintings, not crude scratches or faded images, but vivid, living artwork that seemed to move as he watched. Bears of all sizes and shapes flowed across the stone in eternal procession. Some stood on hind legs, holding ceremonial staffs. Others sat in circles with children, human children, around campfires that glowed with the same blue light as the veins in the stone. Between the bears and children moved figures like Echo, pale, luminous beings who seemed to dance through the scenes, linking the separate groups in a tapestry of cooperation and harmony. The artwork told a story of partnership, of shared guardianship, of a time when the boundaries between species were more flexible than modern minds could comprehend. But the most striking image dominated the far wall. It showed a great tree, perhaps the mother of all trees, with roots that reached down into the earth and branches that stretched up to the stars. Bears rested in its lower branches. Children played among its roots, and at its very crown, a figure that looked remarkably like Lily held a star in her upraised hands, its light connecting earth to sky in a cascade of radiance. Michael reached out to touch the image, and as his fingers made contact with the stone, the painting shifted. The starholder's face turned toward him, and it was Lily's face, but older, wiser, powerful with purpose. She smiled at him across time and possibility, and he felt her love like a physical warmth. "This is what could be," the image seemed to whisper. "This is what was promised." A sound from behind him drew his attention, the distant echo of Echo calling his name. He'd been down here longer than he'd realized. The paintings continued to shift and change as he retreated, each one telling a different story of alliance, magic, healing, and wisdom shared between species. When he emerged, blinking in the forest sunlight, he found the clearing transformed. The glowing patterns had spread farther, creating an intricate web of light that connected every living thing in sight. Trees, grass, rocks, the bear family, Echo, and Lily, all part of an impossible network of luminescent connections. Lily sat comfortably in the mother bear's paws, making those cooing sounds babies make when they're perfectly content. The bear cub was curled up against her sister in trust, his breathing steady and healthy despite his earlier ordeal. "You saw?" Echo asked, her starlight eyes searching his face. Michael nodded, still speechless from wonder. "And you choose?" He looked at his daughter, his baby girl who would never really be just a baby again. She was smiling at him, clapping her hands with delight at his return, looking every bit the normal child she'd been that morning, except for the faint glow that now emanated from her skin, so subtle he might have convinced himself he was imagining it if not for what he'd seen below. The mother bear rumbled deep in her chest, a sound full of patience and understanding. The cub lifted his head and meeped softly. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. Michael thought of Savannah, of how he would explain this when she returned. Thought of his ranger station, his reports, his normal life that suddenly felt like a costume he'd outgrown. Thought of his grandfather's eyes in that last moment before death, when he'd gripped Michael's hand and whispered, "Never forget the old stories, boy. They're not just stories." "What would I have to do?" he asked Echo. "Remember," she said simply. "Learn, teach, protect. Guide Lily as she grows into her role. Help maintain the alliance between above and below. The bears will teach you their ways. I will teach you the deeper mysteries. And Lily," she smiled at the baby, "Lily will teach you wonder, as only children can." The choice narrowed down to a single question that every parent must eventually answer. Do I keep my child safe by limiting their world? Or do I help them become who they're meant to be, whatever the risks? Michael looked up at the sky, where the sun was climbing toward noon. Somewhere out there, Savannah was probably shopping for that new car seat, complaining about Portland traffic, completely unaware that their ordinary life had just been revealed as the smallest part of an extraordinary tapestry. "If I choose this path," he said slowly. Will it put my family in danger? All paths hold danger, Echo replied honestly, but this path also holds protectors. The mother bear rumbled agreement, her massive presence a promise of safety. The bears have always defended their guardians, and the passes, they have their own protections. Those who would bring harm cannot find what they refuse to believe exists. Michael made his decision then, not with his head but with his heart. Not with fear, but with faith. He walked to where Lily sat in the bear's protective embrace and lifted his daughter into his arms. She immediately reached out to pat his face with glowing hands. Bright dada, she giggled. To Echo, he said, teach us. We'll learn the old ways. Echo's smile could have lit the darkest cave. Around them, the glowing patterns flared with joy, and the mother bear released a rumbling purr that made the very ground vibrate. Then, let us begin, Echo said. She moved toward a flat rock near the sinkhole's edge. First, you must understand the marks. They are not random. They tell the story of everything that has been and everything that might be. She began to trace patterns on the rock with her fingertip, leaving trails of light that hung in the air. The mother bear watched intently, occasionally adding soft rumbles that seemed to correct or clarify certain symbols. Michael realized with amazement that they were teaching him a language, one that transcended species barriers, one that had been here long before humans built their first cities. Lily watched from his arms, her small head tilting as if following a conversation just beyond human hearing. Every so often, she would babble something that made Echo and the mother bear exchange knowing glances. She already knows more than you, Echo explained at one point. The very young remember what adults forget. They haven't yet built walls around possibility. As the lesson continued, Michael found himself slipping into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. The marks Echo drew began to make sense, creating pictures that told stories that created understanding, that sparked recognition, that awakened knowledge he never realized he possessed. Time passed differently, Echo had warned, and she was right. What felt like an hour might have been 3 or 10. The sun moved across the sky, but slowly, as if reluctant to rush this moment of understanding. It was the sound of distant voices that finally broke the timeless bubble they'd been occupying. Real voices this time, not the magical whispers Michael was learning to interpret. Definitely human, definitely searching. Echo sighed softly. The turning aside grows weak. Your people approach. Michael could hear them now, rangers calling his name, probably sent by Sarah Chen from the main station when he hadn't checked in for his morning report. They sounded worried. We need a story, he said, practical concerns suddenly crashing back into his awareness. Something to explain. He gestured at the glowing aftermath of magic, at the mother bear calmly sitting with her cub, at his daughter who was literally radiating light. Magic knows how to hide from those not ready to see, Echo assured him. She raised her hands, and the glowing patterns began to dim, settling deeper into the earth, into the rocks, into the trees. Within moments, the clearing looked ordinary again, just another forest glade with a dangerous sinkhole that would need to be properly cordoned off. Only the faintest shimmer remained, visible only to those who knew to look for it. When they arrive, Echo instructed, tell them you found the bear cub trapped, called for the mother bear, and she managed to retrieve him. Such things happen sometimes in nature. They will add their own rational explanation to make it fit their understanding of the world. The mother bear was already moving deeper into the forest, her cub following closely. Before she disappeared into the shadows, she turned back to look at Michael one last time. He understood the message. Until tomorrow. Same place, same time. We continue. Echo began to fade like mist in morning sun. "I return to the bright dark," she said, "but I am never far. When Lily is ready for deeper lessons, she will know how to call me." "Wait," Michael said urgently. "I need to know. What's the first thing I should teach her? Where do we start?" Echo smiled as she became translucent. "Teach her what every light keeper must know first, that love is the strongest magic, and that wonder exists in the smallest moments. Watch a dewdrop form. Listen to the earth breathe. Feel the heartbeat in stone. Start with simple marvels, and greater mysteries will reveal themselves." She was gone then, leaving only a faint scent of starlight and crystal caves. The voices were very close now. Michael could make out words, blood smears on that tree, bear tracks everywhere. Haven't answered his radio all morning. He looked down at Lily, who looked perfectly normal now, except for the wisdom in her green eyes and the faintest glow that would probably be invisible to anyone who didn't know to look for it. "Ready for some more normal day, baby girl?" he whispered. "At least for a little while?" She patted his cheek and babbled something that sounded suspiciously like pretend play, words she definitely hadn't known until today's impossible adventure. Then she laughed, a pure sound of delight that made him smile despite his racing heart. The first rangers burst through the tree line just as Michael was positioning Lily securely in one arm and preparing his story. They were his friends, Jack Murphy and Elena Rodriguez from Station 3. Their faces showed relief when they saw him standing, concern when they noticed the massive sinkhole. "Michael, thank God," Jack called out. "We've been trying to reach you for hours. Central Dispatch got reports of a huge bear roaring around here. We were worried. False alarm, sort of." Michael interrupted, keeping his voice steady. "Black bear cub fell in that sinkhole. Must have opened up overnight from that heavy rain we had last week. Mother bear was understandably upset. I managed to keep her calm while she figured out how to get him out." Elena was already examining the sinkhole's edges, taking photos for her report. "Jesus, that's a big hole. How the hell did the cub get out? These sides are almost vertical." "Found a narrow passage around the back," Michael said, grateful he'd actually seen such a passage. "Probably an old animal burrow that connected to the cave system. Cub crawled out on his own once he calmed down enough to look for an exit." Both rangers nodded, accepting the explanation. It was plausible enough in a forest full of geological oddities and underground waterways. "Lucky you kept your cool," Jack said. "Mama bear could have done serious damage if she'd panicked or thought you were a threat to her cub." "Yeah," Michael agreed, shifting Lily to his other arm when she started getting wiggly. "Lucky." Elena was still photographing and taking measurements. "We'll need to get a team out here to secure this area. Can't have tourists or hikers stumbling into this death trap. Hey, Michael, your kid's been remarkably quiet through all this. Usually little ones this age freak out around bears." Michael looked down at Lily, who chose that moment to give Elena her biggest, most innocent smile, the one that made strangers coo and offer gifts in grocery stores. "She's always been unusually calm," he said, which was true enough. "Nothing much phases our Lily." As they talked logistics and safety measures, Michael noticed Jack examining his hands. "Cut yourself?" Jack asked, pointing at the dirt under Michael's nails. "Helped dig a bit at the burrow entrance," Michael replied smoothly. "Thought maybe I could widen it for the cub, but Mama Bear beat me to it." The explanation satisfied them. Within 20 minutes, they had called in grid coordinates, taken preliminary measurements, and were preparing to mark the sinkhole temporarily while waiting for a full safety team. "Why don't you head home, Mike?" Elena suggested. "We've got this covered. You look beat, and I bet Lily's due for her nap. Michael gratefully accepted the out. As he walked back through the forest toward his cottage, Lily secure in his arms, he wondered how he would explain any of this to Savannah when she returned tomorrow. "How did you tell your wife that your baby daughter was destined to become a magical guardian of ancient passages between worlds, that your normal life had just been shattered by the revelation that wonder was real and waiting just beneath the surface of everyday reality?" Lost in thought, he almost missed the subtle signs of the forest's transformation. But Lily's excited babbling drew his attention to the details. Small flowers that hadn't been there this morning now dotted the path. Those same star bells he'd seen where Echo walked. Birds sang different songs, harmonies that seemed to weave through the air like visible music. Even the quality of light had changed, taking on a golden glow despite the noon hour. When they reached the cottage, Michael noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. In the flower bed by the front door, where Savannah had planted her prize roses, new growth had emerged overnight. Not weeds, but something extraordinary. Crystalline plants that caught and refracted light, creating rainbow patterns on the cottage walls. Bright flowers, Lily cooed, reaching toward them. Michael carefully extracted one from the soil. Its roots left glowing traces in the earth, and the crystal petals tinkled softly against each other. This was proof. Undeniable evidence that what had happened wasn't just his imagination overheating from stress and sleep deprivation. Inside the cottage, everything appeared normal except for subtle changes only someone who knew to look would notice. The wooden beams showed faint traces of the same glowing patterns he'd seen in the earth. Shadows in corners held deeper mysteries. The very air felt charged with possibility. Michael set Lily in her playpen and sank onto the couch, his mind whirling with implications. He needed to call Savannah, but what could he possibly say? "Honey, our daughter performed a miracle this morning, and now she's a chosen guardian of magical passages that exist beneath our feet?" She'd think he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe this was all an elaborate stress hallucination brought on by single-parent exhaustion and too little sleep. Except every sensory detail remained crystal clear. The memory of Echo's starlight eyes, the feel of the glowing veins beneath his fingers, the sound of the mother bear's impossible communication. And there was Lily, playing calmly with her toys, occasionally humming that eerie, multi-toned song that made his skin tingle. She showed no signs of trauma or confusion. If anything, she seemed more alert, more present, more herself than ever before. His phone buzzed with a text from Savannah. "Just boarded train home, can't wait to see my babies, bringing surprise for dinner. Kiss Lily for me." Michael stared at the message, guilt and anxiety warring in his stomach. How many secrets could a marriage hold before it fractured under the weight? But what was the alternative? Telling her the truth and watching her face fill with disbelief, concern, maybe even fear for his mental state. He typed back, "Can't wait to see you. We missed you. Lily has some new skills to show you." He typed back, "Can't wait to see you. We missed you. Lily has some new skills to show you." It was the most truthful lie he could manage. The rest of the day passed in a strange duality, normal activities overlaid with impossible awareness. Michael changed diapers that now left traces of starlight on his fingers. He prepared lunch in a kitchen where shadows whispered ancient songs. Every time he looked at Lily, he saw both his baby daughter and the prophesied light keeper she was becoming. The crystalline flower sat on the windowsill, its petals catching afternoon light and painting rainbow patterns across the walls. Proof. Evidence. A reminder that this morning's events were as real as the weight of his daughter in his arms. Evening approached, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Michael had just finished giving Lily her bath when he heard Savannah's car in the driveway. His heart hammered against his ribs. How did you greet your wife after your world had been turned inside out? How did you hold her hand knowing you now held secrets that would sound insane if spoken aloud? The door opened, and Savannah burst in with her usual energy, bags in hand and stories about Portland traffic already tumbling from her lips. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Michael's face. "Baby, what's wrong? You look exhausted." She set down her bags and cupped his face with familiar hands. "Did something happen while I was gone?" Michael opened his mouth to speak and found himself at a crossroads. In that moment, looking into his wife's concerned eyes, he had a choice that would define their future. He could maintain the comfortable lie, keep their lives separated from the wonder and danger he'd discovered, or he could trust in their love, in the foundation they'd built together, in the possibility that Savannah might believe because she loved them enough to see beyond the ordinary. "Savannah," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "something extraordinary happened today." She led him to the couch, still holding his hand. "Tell me." So he did. Starting with the morning fog and the coffee cup clicking too loud against the table, he told her everything. The Cubs' fall, Lily's impossible knowledge, the journey into the mountain, Echo and the paintings, the choice he'd been given, and the responsibilities they now carried. Savannah listened without interruption, her face cycling through disbelief, concern, wonder, and finally, a deep consideration that told him she wasn't dismissing his words as madness. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Show me," she finally said. Michael picked up the crystalline flower. In Savannah's hands it began to sing, a soft humming that made her gasp. He showed her how shadows in corners now had depth and mystery. He demonstrated the faint glow that surrounded Lily when she slept in certain moonlight. "And tomorrow?" Savannah asked. "The bears come back?" "Every morning," Michael confirmed. "They'll teach us, and we'll learn to protect the passages." Savannah was quiet again, processing, integrating this new reality into everything she thought she knew about the world. Finally, she stood and walked to Lily's crib. Their daughter was watching them with those ancient young eyes, a faint smile playing on her lips as if she knew this moment was coming. "Hi, baby girl," Savannah whispered. "I hear you've been busy while Mama was away." Lily giggled and reached up with glowing hands. As Savannah lifted her, a burst of starlight wrapped around mother and child, so bright Michael had to blink. When his vision cleared, Savannah was crying softly, but smiling. "I feel it," she breathed. "All the love and responsibility and wonder. It's in her already, waiting to bloom." She turned to Michael, Lily still in her arms. "Then we do this together, as a family." Relief and love flooded through him. Of course, Savannah would accept this. She had always been the one to believe in possibility, to see magic in ordinary moments. It was part of why he'd fallen in love with her. "But we need ground rules," she added, her practical nature reasserting itself. "I won't have our daughter crawling through unexplored caves without proper safety measures. Guardian or not, she's still our baby, and she's still human enough to get hurt." Michael laughed, the sound releasing tension he'd been holding all day. This was Savannah, accepting the impossible while making lists for how to manage it safely. That night, as they prepared for bed, with Lily sleeping peacefully between them, Savannah surprised him one more time. "You know," she said, tracing patterns on his arm that suddenly began to glow faintly under her touch. "I think my grandmother would have loved this. She always talked about her mother knowing the old ways, used to make healing teas that worked when nothing else would, sang songs that made plants grow faster." She smiled at the glowing marks her fingers left on his skin. Maybe it's been in my family all along, just waiting for the right moment to wake up again. Michael felt pieces clicking into place, understanding why Savannah had been so drawn to this mountain cottage in the first place, why she always knew when storms were coming by the ache in her bones, why Lily had inherited the ability to see beyond the ordinary. Together, he promised, kissing her forehead. Together, she confirmed. Dawn came quietly to Millbrook Valley, painting the sky in soft pastels. Michael and Savannah stood at the garden gate with Lily bundled between them. In the forest beyond, they could see the mother bear and her cub waiting at their agreed meeting place. The cub was stronger now, playful and curious, showing no signs of yesterday's ordeal. Echo materialized beside them like morning mist taking form. "You're ready to begin?" she asked. "We're ready," Savannah answered, and Michael heard the echo of his own acceptance in her voice. As they walked together toward the Sinkhole, now properly called the Gateway in their private language, Michael noticed how the world had shifted overnight. Colors were more vivid. Sounds carried deeper meanings. The very air felt alive with possibility. The lessons that followed were unlike anything Michael had experienced. The mother bear taught them to read signs in bark and soil that revealed the health of the forest. Echo showed them how to nurture the glowing veins in the earth, to help them spread and strengthen the connections between sacred spaces. Lily, held carefully but allowed to touch and explore under watchful eyes, responded to everything with wonder and rapid learning that amazed them all. By mid-morning, they had learned the basic marks of protection that would keep humans away from unstable passages. By noon, they understood the rhythms of the mountain's breathing, the pulse of underground waters, the whisper of roots that carried news between trees. It was just before they broke for lunch that Echo surprised them again. "Look," she said, pointing into the sky. High above, a golden eagle circled, and on its back rode another guardian, a young man with sun-bright skin and hair like flames. He raised his hand in greeting, and Michael felt Savannah's sharp intake of breath. "There are others," Echo explained, "many in different places, guarding different thresholds. You won't be alone in this work." The eagle rider descended enough for them to see his smile before soaring away toward distant mountains. "So much to learn," Savannah murmured, wonder evident in her voice. "A lifetime of learning," Echo confirmed, "and generations of guardianship. If Lily chooses to accept her role when she's older." They all looked at the baby, who was currently fascinated by the dancing shadows cast by a crystal Echo had given her. Shadows that moved with purpose, telling stories for those who knew how to read them. "Choice," Michael repeated, remembering his own crossroads less than 24 hours ago. "There's always a choice." "Always," Echo agreed. As they finished their first lesson and prepared to return home for Lily's nap, Michael felt something he couldn't have imagined yesterday. Peace with the extraordinary. Their lives had been transformed by wonder, but at their core they remained the same family. They would still argue about doing dishes, still worry about Lily's teething, still laugh at bad jokes and struggle with ordinary challenges. The difference was that now they knew magic waited in the spaces between heartbeats. Mystery lurked beneath familiar surfaces, and their daughter carried a light that could bridge worlds. Walking back through the forest, with Savannah telling Lily about all the new things they would learn together, and the mother bear and her cub accompanying them as far as the garden's edge, Michael realized that choosing wonder hadn't made their lives harder. It had made them infinitely richer. The cottage came into view, sunlight glinting off windows that now reflected more than just the forest. Home looked the same, but felt different. Not just a shelter, but a threshold. a place where ordinary and extraordinary could coexist, where a family could grow in both magical and mundane ways. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the sky, Lily made a new sound, her first real word that wasn't mama or dada. "Light," she said clearly, pointing at the first star appearing in the darkening sky. Savannah and Michael exchanged a glance full of love, acceptance, and shared wonder. Their daughter was speaking more truth than she knew. She was light, the light that had found a path through darkness, the light that had rebuilt broken bridges, the light that would guide them into an extraordinary future. The forest whispered its ancient songs, the mountain hummed its eternal rhythms, and somewhere in the depths below, the passages glowed a little brighter, tended by love, protected by alliance, and destined to remain open as long as light keepers walked the earth. Their new life had begun,